This is part 3 of lecture 5. In this final part of the lecture, we're going to talk about self-improvement. So in the first part, we talked about the answer to the question, who are we? Now we turn to a question that we probably ask ourselves even more, and that is, who do we want to be, or who do we want to become? And if we think about ourselves in this way, there's actually 3 different versions of ourselves. Again, 3 different ways of looking at yourself. You can look at your actual self, so who am I right now? You can think about your ideal self, so who do I want to become? Or you can think about your odd self. Who do I think I should be? And there's a difference between the ideal and the odd self. So ideal self is really intrinsic, right? So really something how you ideally would like to develop yourself. And an odd self is something extrinsic. So what do you expect others, what do others expect from you? Maybe your parents put a lot of pressure on you to become a lawyer later. And then that would be your odd self becoming a lawyer. So we have these 3 different versions, and according to self-discrepancy theory, people experience emotional discomfort when these different versions of the self are in conflict, and they realize this. So if you feel like your actual self is really far off from your ideal self, then this doesn't really feel nice. Maybe you really like to consider yourself as someone who loves reading, but you never pick up a book anymore. And if you realize this, that your ideal self, a person that loves reading, that reads books, is not in line with your actual self, this is an unpleasant experience. And we are motivated to become a better version of ourselves and become closer towards our ideal self. So how can we do this? In this final part of the lecture, I'm going to give you some tips and tricks to become a better version. And with better, I mean a version that is more close to your ideal self, how you really want to become. Okay, so the first thing that you really need in order to reach goals and become a better version of yourself is self-control. And self-control refers to the ability to resist immediate desires to achieve long-term goals. So this is basically this little person that is steering the wheel in your brain, deciding which way you should be going. So let's imagine you want to cut down on sugar, and you think, I want to eat more healthy. You have this goal, my ideal self is someone who eats healthy foods. And then you get offered this delicious chocolate muffin, or what is it, donuts. Then you have to use, if you love donuts and you love chocolate, and who doesn't, then you have to use your capacity for self-control to refrain from acting on the immediate desire to eat this delicious-looking donut, and instead eat something that is more healthy. So self-control enables us to reach long-term goals and resist desires. And self-control is something that we all need in different moments of our life. For example, you are now watching this lecture. I hope you enjoy it. But at the same time, you might also do something that you enjoy even more, that sort of is more in line with your hedonic impulses, like going out with your friends, or maybe going to the gym, or laying on the couch watching Netflix. So these are all activities that are immediately maybe more rewarding than watching this lecture. But you refrain from doing so because you want to be a good student, right? You want to, learn about psychology, and you want to nail this exam. So that's why you're watching this lecture. Maybe you engaged in self-control to reach this goal. We also know from my research that self-control is also needed in close relationships. If we are in a relationship, then we often have impulses that are actually not so good for our relationship. We want to choose for ourselves instead of for our partner. Or maybe you feel tempted by an attractive alternative partner, and you feel this desire to flirt or even kiss or even go even further with an alternative partner. And self-control is also in those cases necessary in order to override this and be a good relationship partner. So in my research, I also showed that people with higher levels of self-control actually have better abilities to protect and maintain their close relationships. So self-control is super important, and we all want to be better at it, right? So I'm going to give you some tips and tricks on how to increase or, use your self-control to your best capacity. First thing that really helps are implementation intentions. And implementation intentions are very specific plans that people make about where and when and how they want to reach a certain goal, and also resist temptation. So a problem a lot of people have is that they have this general fitness goal, for example. They feel like, I really should work out more often. But this won't help you. You have to make very specific plans. So maybe tell yourself, so on Tuesday evening, when I come home from the university, the first thing I do is wear my running gear and go out for a run outside in the forest. So if I come home, then I'll go running. If at work someone offers me a chocolate brownie, I'm gonna say no. So the more concrete, the better it works. So implementation intentions are very small, concrete plans that you make that really will help you in the long term reaching certain goals. The second strategy that you can use is sort of trying to refrain from temptations, so avoid temptations overall. So for example, if you know that you really love a donut and you know that you wouldn't be able to resist it when you buy it in the store and it's laying in your home, then just don't buy it in the store. Make sure there's no candy in your house. That will make it way more easy for you to reach that goal than if you still buy it and you have to resist it all the time. Or another example with more study related, if you are a person that is easily distracted, so maybe you're watching me, but at the same time you're scrolling through your Insta page and you are distracted by that. So then my tip would be just put away your phone and turn it off even, or on plane mode to make sure that you cannot be distracted anymore. So make it easier for yourself to stay focused on this certain goal. And finally, I want to say something that's also in the book, and that is a description of ego depletion. And ego depletion, according to research, is a state, a temporary state, in which we have a diminished ability to exercise self-control because we are exhausted. So, for example, here you see a graph. If you have worked really hard throughout the day, and if you work hard, you have to use a lot of self-control to, engage in behaviors that are good for the goals that you want to reach. And if you work really hard, then you're actually more likely to eat the cookie that you actually don't want to eat according to your the health goals that you have. So the idea of ego depletion is that we can be exhausted of self-control, and then we can no longer refrain from it. But I wanted to say to you that there's a lot of criticism on this theory. I also am very critical of this theory because I know that one thing that really matters more than depletion or exhaustion of efforts or exhaustion of resources is motivation. So as long as you keep being very motivated, then you're probably also likely to reach the goal of refraining from eating the cookie. So there's a lot of debate about whether ego depletion is or is not a real thing. But now you have a sense of how you can use self-control to become a better version of yourself. But there's one other thing that's really important, and that is your mindset. And more specifically, it's whether or not you believe that you can improve yourself. So only if you feel like you can actually become a better person, then you are motivated in order to change your behavior and actually become a better person. So generally, there's this difference between people having a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. And if you have a growth mindset, you have the idea that your abilities are malleable qualities that we can cultivate and grow. So you can become better at something. If you have a fixed mindset, you feel like you have a certain set of qualities and that cannot be changed. So if you have a fixed mindset, then why should you even try to become a better person? You are just the way you are. You're not good at math, so you will never, become better, and you don't exercise, you don't try to become better, and you stay poor at math. So just one example. So developing a growth mindset will definitely help you, reach higher goals. So this is also sort of the message that a lot of self-help books claim, that you should believe in yourself to improve. And they have a point, totally. But I do want to point out that it's also important that you actually put in the work. So just affirmations, looking at the mirror and saying to yourself, I am good the way I am and I am perfect, that won't help you. You have to put in the work. So you have to believe that you can become better and then do the work, and then you will be a better version of yourself. So only a positive mindset, that has never helped anyone much. So you have to change your behavior as well. This difference between a fixed and a growth mindset, that can also be implemented on you in a very subtle way by the feedback you receive from teachers, for example, and caregivers. So teachers have the power to change your mindset, either having a more fixed mindset or a more growth mindset. And as an illustration, I would invite you to watch the following film clip.
So check this out. Carol Dweck and her colleagues wanted to look into the impacts that praise had on children's development. So what they did is they took over 400 fifth grade students from all across the nation, and they did a really simple yet interesting study. Here's how it went down. They gave all the kids a really easy nonverbal IQ test. There were 10 questions, and at the end of the test, they praised all the children in one of two ways. The first group was praised for their intelligence. So they said, "Wow, great job, you must be really smart at this." Now the second group was praised for their effort. So they said, "Wow, great job, you must have worked really hard at this." Now this is a really subtle difference, but the impact it had is incredible. So after praising the kids and getting them divided up into the two groups, they gave them all an option for their next test. The first option was, hey, this next test is going to be a little bit harder, but it's going to be a great opportunity to learn and grow. Now the second option was, this next test will be similar to the first and you will surely do well on it. Now the interesting thing is, out of the group that was praised for their intelligence, 67% of them chose the easier option, while 92% of the kids who were praised for their effort chose the harder test. This is unbelievable to think about, how just the subtle difference in the way that they were praised had such an impact. Carol Dweck explains why this happens.
The child or adult hears, "Oh, you think I'm brilliant and talented. That's why you admire me. That's why you value me. I better not do anything that will disprove this evaluation." As a result, they enter a fixed mindset, they play it safe in the future, and they limit the growth of their talents. Whereas focusing on the strategies they use, the way they're stretching themselves and taking on hard tasks, the intense practice they're doing, those are the kinds of things that say to a child or an older athlete, it's about the process of growth. As a result, they don't feel, oh, if I make a mistake, you won't think I'm talented. They think, oh, if I don't take on hard things and stick to them, I'm not going to grow.
Next, Dweck and her colleagues gave all the kids a really difficult test. It was one that they would surely fail, but they wanted to look at how the different kids attacked this challenge. Dweck noticed that the group that was praised for effort worked harder, longer, and actually enjoyed this test more than the group that was praised for their intelligence. This group got really frustrated with this test and had the tendency to give up early. After this artificially induced failure round, all of the kids were given a third and final test. Now this test was the same level of difficulty as the first one, but check out the results. The group that was praised for their intelligence actually did worse on this test than the first one. Their average score actually dropped by 20%, while the group that was praised for their effort did significantly better, raising their average score by nearly 30%. This is a 50% difference in performance that was caused by a few subtle differences in the way that they were praised.
Okay, so we now saw that we are all working towards a better version of ourselves, and that self-control helps and believing in yourself really helps. And then we take all these capacities and we have our self-concept and we have our self-esteem and we present ourselves to the world around us. And this is what this final part of the lecture is about. It's about self-presentation. And if you like it or not, we are all preoccupied by how we present ourselves to the social world. For example, in the morning, if you are, thinking about what you should wear, or maybe you're putting on makeup, you're thinking about how you present yourself to the world. And some people spend a lot of time on it, and others don't. But it's a process, it's a decision on how you want to present yourself. But also, throughout the days, you're presenting yourself in different ways. Of course, also, for example, through your social media accounts, you think about how you want to present yourself to the world around you. And if you do all this, you engage in impression management. And impression management basically refers to the process in which we present the ideal version of ourselves to the world. So We are more interested in presenting the ideal version to the world than our actual self. So we want to convince people that we are worthwhile, that we are interesting, that we are fun. And we sometimes use strategies in order to present a better version of ourselves to others. I'm going to describe 2 strategies with you because they have a warning within them. So the first strategy that a lot of people use, especially when it comes to presenting themselves to people with higher social status, is ingratiation. And ingratiation is just a fancy word of flattering and praising others in order for them to like you. So if you use ingratiation, you're basically sucking up to people. And that's one of the impression management tools that people tend to use. And it can really backfire. So you should be careful when doing this because sometimes people really like it. If in the social status, because people love getting good feedback. So if you're complimenting a person that's higher in social status, then that might be good in the short run. But people that are looking at you, they are probably seeing this act of ingratiation, and that can be, work negatively for your image. So people will start thinking about you that you're sucking up, and that's a quality that people don't want to have. So be careful when it comes to ingratiation. The second thing that people sometimes do, and this is maybe even more negative, more detrimental than ingratiation, is self-handicapping. And if you self-handicap, that means that you are creating obstacles and excuses for yourself. So if you perform poorly, you can blame circumstances. So this is, here you see someone sitting on the couch right before this big race that she's been working towards for months. She's been training, and right before she has to go, she's eating this bag of potato chips. This is really irrational behavior, right? She's been working towards this goal. She wants to do good, but she's eating the bag of potato chips. And she might be doing so because she's using self-handicapping. If she doesn't perform well on the race, which she's sort of sabotaging her outcome now herself, then she can blame the potato chips. She can say, right before I went running, I ate this bag of chips, so that's probably why I didn't have my PR today. Also something that I saw students do in the past when it comes to making an exam. Also very motivated students. The night before the exam, they go out partying. And they party really hard. And then the moment that they have to do an exam, they say, yeah, I'll probably perform very poorly. I probably fail this exam because I'm exhausted and I'm actually still hungover. So, I'll probably not do well. This might sound very stupid, and it is actually very stupid. But this is a way of protecting your self-esteem. If you fail, then you can blame the circumstances. And a lot of people that have sort of failure anxiety, feel maybe lower levels of self-esteem, might engage in these behaviors because they don't really believe in themselves. They are so afraid of failing the exam that they just create circumstances that make them fail. So it's also a way of a sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy, this self-handicapping. So please be aware of this and don't engage in this behavior when it comes to making your exam. This is the end of the lecture. Thanks for watching.